Welcome to Business Success Tips, where you learn to make more money in less time and have a lot more fun. I'm Paul Sandeman, your host, founder of Contractor Staffing Source, where we help clients and contractors build great teams. My guest today is James Gorzynski from Certified Exit Planners. Speaking of having more fun, right? So James, um, there's been, I don't know if it's a myth or reality, that it's really hard to sell a construction company because there's no value in it. Can you go a little bit? Maybe you sold a construction company, how you value it? Does it make any sense? Because you're the expert in this. I'd like to hear, and first a little bit your background and why we should listen to you, and then how you actually pull that off.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So my original background was actually in accounting and didn't have any experience with trades, but I ended up starting a spray foam insulation company and successfully exited that company. The biggest thing that I find most construction companies lack in some regard are structure and with regard to process and procedure and kind of implementing and delegating properly to their team members and utilizing a little bit more of the technology side so that you have a little bit more of a transferable company. And I found that to be 100% true in my case as well.
So, how big does the company have to be before it's worth anything to anybody who wants to buy it?
Great question. That varies quite a bit. So there's always I guess there's always potential buyers. To answer your question, it really depends on how that folds into your financial plan. Is this going to propel you into the next phase, the next chapter of your life? Are you creating more choices for you, or are you actually retiring and spending more time with family? So the question should really be answered on what your goal is and to build towards that value. And so and especially if there's someone within the internal team that wants to buy the company, there's often ways to structure it so that you can start with the internal team. If that doesn't work, you kind of move more towards the third party phase and can really set up a meaningful and mutual structure that benefits both companies. So to answer your question, it can be as little as a couple $100,000 in revenue, as obviously up to an infinite amount of revenue there. But it could be a solopreneur, currently working with a roofing contractor that's a single person solopreneur and is building out a team, and they're doing about 200K in revenue now. Their goal is to hit 3 million in less than 3 years, and so it just really depends on what your goal is.
So let's say you have a roofing company. They're
Yeah.
doing 3 million with an EBITDA of, I don't know, 10%, whatever, 300,000 net, net, net. What's that worth and who's going to buy it and how long is it going to take?
Great question. So the general range for most companies above $1 million in revenue is just going to be between the 2 to 4x on adjusted EBITDA, SDE, owner benefit, whatever term you want to use. However, it's always going to slingshot or slide based upon that structure. So going back to a solopreneur roofing contractor with no one on their internal team, it's going to slide closer to the 2 or even below, more towards the 1x of that adjusted EBITDA. And conversely, maybe you're making a little bit less money from an owner benefit perspective, but you have more structure. You are going to fetch generally a larger EBITDA. So a lot of times it's helpful to go through that process and compare and benchmark against similarly sized companies and compare the org chart. So that's always a huge question that a potential buyer is going to focus on.
So let's say I've got this roofing company, it's doing 3 million. I've got pick a number 12 employees. I've got pretty good systems down. I've got marketing systems. I got a way to recruit people. It can pretty much function without me. Um, I build it to that, and let's see if it's doing 3 million, it's sending 300,000. So could I expect to get what, four times 300,000 on a good day?
I would say that's about accurate. Between the 3 and 4x is reasonable, and I really like to look at it from a reasonable perspective and then try to beat that reasonable budget or expectation. So that would be fairly accurate there at the
So I
900.
could get a million, million two for the company on a good day.
Exactly. And the other thing is if it's operating without the owner generally, and from a day-to-day perspective, a lot of times you can time it. So for example, a couple years ago, the interest rates were much lower. People were using money and leveraging it at a much aggressive rate. So you may have been able to get a 4, 4.5, even 5x for the same company as today that might merit a 3.25 to 3.5 because the cost of money is higher. So there's often a lot of market conditions. And so if you de-risk the company, meaning have more structure and it operates with less of the the ownership managing it, then a lot of times you can wait it out a little bit and try to ride the roller coaster a little bit and plan appropriately so it's best for you, your employees, and your family.
So let's say I go back to the roofing company. It's doing 3 million, netting 300,000. Um, I guess the question is, if I can make 300,000 in 3 years, I can make 300,000 here for 3 years. Why do I want to sell it for 1 million? I could just wait 3 years and get the money.
That's 100% of that's 100% of the question you should be asking yourself and how that folds into the exit plan. Sometimes it's better to partner up with someone else to take it to the next level and maybe give away 10%, 20% of the company through maybe a sinking fund, a vesting schedule, and they can take it, run the day to day. They're working real hard to kind of carry on your legacy, and maybe you can sell it to them down the road where you really benefit a lot more and your direct family does, as well as that maybe other, party that's kind of coming into the picture. But it's a great question, and sometimes people will ride it out for quite a while.
Because I would say, let's say I can hire somebody to run it for 100 grand, right?
Mhm.
Just for fun. Then I'm making 200 grand. I'm not there. Well, I'd have to have 5 million in cash to make the 200,000 or something like that, right? Realistically, if I was going to make the same amount of revenue. So the question is, why would I sell it if I can hire somebody to run it for 100 grand, take home 200,000 a year? Would that be a question you would answer?
Absolutely. That it comes back to what we call the three legs of the stool from an exit planning perspective. Without any leg of the stool, then one of the legs of the stool falls over. So in some cases, it does make sense to exit for other reasons other than what you're saying from a simple business perspective. So the three legs of the stool are the business leg, which most business owners focus on. The other is the financial leg, which is incredibly important for post-retirement or next chapter. And then the final is the personal leg. So what you're saying makes perfect sense in many cases. However, if it does not align with all three legs of the stool, then it doesn't really fit in with the exit plan. And the exit plan doesn't necessarily mean exit now. It just means exit when it's appropriate. So it's more of a exit preparedness perspective that really is important.
Now, do you help people prepare to exit, or they just call you when they're ready to exit?
The ideal person would want to exit and who wants to implement a strategic plan is actually 3 to 5 years out. It's still possible at the 18 months to 24 months in some cases, but you really want a strong cadence to kind of clean up a lot of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, to maximize the value. And in some cases, folks come to us that want to sell in less than 12 months. They've already hit their critical mass, and that kind of falls under the brokerage M&A world where hey, we want to list the business ASAP. We want to sell it for whatever we can get and hope for the best. But from that point, you can only do so much with limited time.
So, do you prefer somebody who wants to sell in 3 months, 5 months? Who's your ideal client?
Ideal client for sure is in that 3 to 5 year kind of phase because we have time to prepare an exit plan. We execute the exit plan, and then if they decide they want to keep the business for the exact reason you had mentioned prior, where the ROI is just not there, then they just continue to operate the business. When they're 12 months out from when they actually want to sell it and it fits into the three legs of the stool and their exit plan, that's when there's a nice milestone. We go to market, we sell it. A lot of times we're warming up pre-vetted buyers so that they've already been discussed with our team. And so in those cases, we can do off-market deals that are shortened. But ideally, you can't give back time. That's one thing that you can't
Right.
buy. So if you want to maximize your exit, if you want the best possible outcomes and transitions too. So a lot of times folks don't want to spend 2, 3, 5 years in a transition period. And you really want to spend between 3 and 12 months with a transition, then planning that out and really trying to formulate a what we call a sell box. So a lot of people talk about buyers and what their buy box is, which is just a fancy word for what's their criteria. Well, conversely, the sell box is incredibly important. So why don't we want to attract exactly who we want to sell it to carry on the legacy of that business?
Well, not using names, give me one of your most successful and least successful exit clients.
Oh, great. Well, what's funny is that when I talk to folks, I use for confidentiality purposes, of course, different names. So Avocado Inc. is the kind of healthy company that I always refer back to.
Right.
I very much like food, but Avocado Inc. was roughly around a valuation of 600K about 3 years ago. They're roughly at 4.25 million now and decided not to sell. So for the exact reason that you mentioned, the ROI was not there. Their adjusted EBITDA had skyrocketed from just below 200K up to over a million. So in their mind, why? And they had delegated a lot of the responsibilities. And I can make $1 million with limited day-to-day perspectives. They're essentially still in their exit plan phase at this point.
Mhm.
But when they get to the 12 months or less portion of the timeline or their legacy or their journey there, then they would move into the M&A side and it would fold into their three legs of the
Now,
stool.
how do you get paid for what you do or charge for what you do?
For exit planning, we essentially take retainers, monthly retainers, and we co-pilot that process. And a lot of times our value lies in our relationships with other folks within our network that fold into it. So the analogy that a lot of financial advisors use is quarterbacking the process. We're very much similar, except we're taking the whole plan. They're focused on the financial leg, and exit planner focuses on all three legs and brings in experts in different areas to be the most efficient uh, from a dollars and cents perspective for the business owner and essentially following that process. So that's kind of the goal there. Conversely, some clients have a financial advisor or someone else, an M&A attorney or a friend maybe that is going to drive the project, or maybe someone internally, and we kind of consider them part of the advisory team. We can be the co-pilot in that situation, or a sous chef is another example that I use. So we can kind of fill in the gaps for them and help them execute that plan.
Now, how do you charge? To depend on the size of the company, how do you, is it like a monthly fee of 2,000 bucks? I mean, how do you charge for your services? Just give me an example.
Yeah, great question. Every company is different. Everyone's customized. Everyone's going to have a different perspective. So we try to make it as easy as possible based on the goals that they have and reverse engineer it so that it's a simple and upfront fee. We don't really have contracts. So at any point, if things are not working, then it's really got to be a two-way street. Then they can kind of, we can kind of part ways and hopefully we can make it happen. It's pretty rare that happens, but generally our fees range between 2,000 and 10,000 per month depending on the size. So ideal clients are generally within the 5 million to 25 million in revenue, and 10 employees up to about 100 employees is where that really makes sense. The concepts that we're really implementing are being done with the 50 million plus companies. We're just filling that void with smaller companies that sometimes get overlooked. And that's my why. I really love carrying on the legacy of these businesses. And, personally have done that. My family's always been in entrepreneurship. I work with my wife as well. So that's what we care about. We want that to fold into the future and, so the company can thrive.
Now, I've noticed that with AI, um, scaring a lot of private equity away from businesses that sell information because AI is going to do that pretty much for free in the nearest future, whether you're an attorney or a doctor. You're going to have everybody on your phone, right? As long as it's information, but your phone isn't going to fix your heater or fix your roof or whatever. So, have you seen a large influx of private equity into the construction industry, like roofers, plumbers, various service industries, where it was more available than it was, like, say, 5 years ago?
Absolutely. It's kind of interesting. I started analyzing this about 10 to 12 years ago, and that's actually why I got into the construction and trade business because I saw that quite a while ago personally, and it was part of my strategy. But in the interim, a lot of these Ivy League schools are pumping out what they call theses through these MBA programs, which I think sounds very pretentious. To me, it's just a theory, obviously, but the reality is that it's true. All these hardworking folks in the trade and construction fields are doing things that a lot of those that AI cannot replace, and if it can, it's going to take quite a long time to do. And so there's a lot of PE funds and larger companies, family offices that are buying a lot of these companies. So a lot of times that's part of the exit plan. When I talk about sellbox, for example, we have a client that has no interest in selling to a PE fund, which eliminates 75% of the potential suitors. However, doesn't mean we can't find the right fit. Part of the process is finding the ideal buyer that matches your sell box. So in that case, we're essentially eliminating them. It means you might fetch a little bit lower sell price because there's less competition. However, maybe that's not as important because you have so much built up within that exit plan, and so the money doesn't matter as much to you. And then conversely, someone might say, I really want to maximize my sale price. I want three, five, 10 offers on the table. How can I get the most amount of money? But I still want to take care of my employees. How do we do that? And so there's a
Right.
lot of ways to kind of set it up that way.
Okay. Now, can you, I don't know if you give me numbers or not, but how long you been doing this, James? Like 5 years or something? How long you been actually in the exit business?
Yeah, so the exit, I've been a SEPA for a little over a year now, but I've been implementing these processes for about 6 or 7 years. So I used to be a fractional CFO, and so a lot of the concepts that we use now were very much aligned with those same concepts that I worked with from a fractional CFO perspective. So, and then the M&A side, I've been working in it for a few years, and we have a separate team that specializes in that as well. So the idea there is to kind of streamline the process so that there's less people involved and it's a little bit easier for a business owner because it's not an easy process. There's a lot of emotion involved in some regards. You're selling a company or trying to improve a company and there's a lot of people and that's what makes it great, the companies, the folks that are involved. So we're very sensitive to that, and then a lot of times it takes a lot of coordination to get that done.
So this may be a personal question, but how many companies have you successfully had people exit or sold?
Within our firm, we've done roughly 125 to 150 million dollars worth of actual exits, M&A transactions. In terms of exit plans that are still ongoing, then we're probably closer to the 25 to 50 million, I would say, is where we're at currently. But the amount of clients that we're onboarding is growing exponentially very quickly. So it's one of those things where it's a very collaborative environment, actually. So even if my advice for anyone would be to, talk to several folks that might be able to help them, and pick one just like you would with anything else. You're looking to work with a lender, you're looking to work with a contractor to build out a remodel. You might want to get two or three different perspectives, see if the personalities match, and kind of go from there. So, we're a smaller firm that is growing pretty quickly. We really don't want to go too big because we really want to protect the quality from our perspective.
Okay. So if somebody's listening to this podcast, who should call you? I mean, somebody who's considering what I hear you saying is that anybody is considering getting out of their business in the next 3 to 5 years and what's a plan to do it and doesn't know exactly how, that's somebody that should call you. And let's say they're doing, I'm going to say I think over a million easy, but they're doing preferably between, I'm guessing between 3 and 10 million, give or take, and they want to get out in 3 to 5 years. That would be somebody who should call you. Is that accurate?
100% accurate, and the qualitative side of that is more freedom and choice as well through kind of setting up structure and delegation within the company. So some clients have no interest in selling in less than 10 years, but and they just really want to work on the business wellness. We call it just a business wellness checkup. How can we improve the efficiency of the company and just want an outside perspective? But the ideal client from an exit planning perspective is 100% what you just mentioned. 3 to 5 years out, don't know where to start, want someone to help kind of co-pilot that process and find clarity and go execute.
Okay. Now, what kind of business do you, or is it just, I mean, there's remodeling companies, there's home building companies, and there's all the service businesses. Do you prefer any of those or do you work with all of those?
We work with all of those types of businesses, but I would say that the ones that we've had the most success and generally recurringly work with are going to, be those landscaping, tree trimming companies, uh, crawl space encapsulation companies, those type of service-based generally have a recurring model. We have worked with a lot more project-based and commercial-based, and especially if they have a split, then it can provide a higher sale price in many cases because they're diversified and they have separate divisions.
Right.
So it yeah, absolutely.
Now, can you help, for example, many years there with a plumbing company,
Mhm.
and what they realized was, let's say they did 10 million in new projects, right? and they did 2 million in plumbing service, like, plumbing. They found out that 2 million in plumbing service was worth way more than the 10 million in projects because that was an ongoing revenue. They had clients, they had a system, and they could say, well, we're going to do 2 million guaranteed every year because they get all these customers that need their plumbing fixed. Whereas the new projects, that all depended on the jobs they got, and that was sort of up in the air. So is that accurate? You're better off with a service business than a new project business as far as exiting.
That is 100% accurate. And so a lot of times going through your different revenue streams and putting them into silos or columns and determining their profitability ROI, meaning short-term cash flow, is incredibly helpful because you might want to take on quite a few of those projects short-term because a lot of times you can bid them a little bit higher and generate cash flow to then bring in additional resources through their people capital and move more towards the recurring and service model that you just mentioned. So being strategic about that is incredibly important because especially if you have unfavorable terms with certain projects as well. If you're working with larger companies that have net 30, 60, 90 days, and it has a massive impact on cash flow, that can really drive where you want to strategically look moving forward. And same with the recurring and service based. If you're getting paid that day or within the week, it's kind of a home run. And most of the
Right.
PE firms or buyers are very much focused on that side where it's not revenue. When we talk about business wellness, it's not just revenue. It's very much profitability and predictable revenue.
And reoccurring revenue. So you can tell people like go, let's say they're a plumbing company, they don't have much of a service end business. You could say, well, let's focus on building your service business versus your new project because that's going to be worth more when you exit. You do things like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And those companies that do it well can go into what we call the best in class. Less than 4% of companies are considered best in class in terms of their exit and exit plan. And, generally speaking, two-thirds, 65 to 75% of companies won't sell due to lack of preparation or they won't hit the goals they want. But the ones that spend the time and I'm really in this to kind of reverse that number, hopefully. But essentially, if you spend the time on creating more of that recurring revenue, you can crack the 5x, 6x, 7x multiple.
Right.
So it's not a one-to-one ratio. It's not you make one more dollar and you get one more dollar in an offer. It's one more
Right.
dollar times your multiple. So it starts to compound, and that's where it's really cool when you kind of look at the what we call the value gap or the
Right.
profit gap of a
And so,
company.
so reoccurring revenue is worth many times more multiple than the project revenue.
Absolutely. And some folks will actually, when they submit an offer, they'll actually show sometimes that bifurcated viewpoint, meaning they'll say, we valued the company based on your number one, your revenue here that was project based at a 1.25 or one and a half multiple or a 2x multiple. And then your recurring revenue, we're going to offer 4.5. And then they'll just send a blended offer rate. So a lot of
Got it.
times thinking about it that way. So if why not, maximize that multiple
Right.
by switching your model if you can?
Cool. So, James, if people want to get in contact with you and go, well, should I sell my company or not? I may want to sell in 3 to 5 years. I assume you'll have the discussion with free for them just to tell them whether it makes any sense or not. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. We do a exploratory discovery. We call it a business wellness checkup because we're just getting to know each other and want to understand where you are currently. So a lot of times, if you want to build towards something, you got to understand the foundation. I liken it to building a house. So where are you today? If you want to find out where you stand, we discuss range of value, probable sell price at this time, and so we go through that process for free. And if you want to move forward from that perspective, then we're here to help. We also have a lot of resources that we offer 100% free where you want to learn about something specific, and that comes in the form of video content, articles, case studies, etc. So we view ourselves as a resource and education-based company. And when the time comes, we're here to help and on the execution side. So I would say about, between 5 and 10% of folks take our information and then either go more the DIY route, and they might have someone that is going to help
Mhm.
do it with them, or a family friend perhaps, and then 9 out of 10 roughly want a kind of a co-pilot, and that's where we would kind of
Cool.
be folded back into the process.
So, James, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, great question. So phone number 704-336-9005. That's our phone line that works for text as well. My email is james@certifiedexitplanners.com. That's planners with an S. Feel free to send an email. Website certifiedexitplanners.com. You're welcome to set up a Calendly appointment with me specifically. So I drive the exit planning division specifically, and so I'm folding in and doing all the project management alongside my wife, along with our extended team. So if someone wants to learn more, then those are probably the best places to go from that perspective.
Great. Well, thanks, James. I appreciate being here. And I think anybody who's even considering selling their company needs to do this before it gets too late and they go, oh, I wish I'd done that 5 years ago. So I think if you are planning exiting your company in the next 3 to 5 years, you should give James a call. Thank you,
Absolutely.
James.
Appreciate it. Thanks,
Appreciate
everybody.
it. Thank you.